The blood on Grishka's hunting knife had not yet dried when she realized her monthly bleeding had not come for the third time, and the truth settled over her like a shroud in the cold autumn air. She stood at the edge of the orc encampment, hidden behind the smokehouse where the clan prepared their winter stores, and pressed one hand against her stomach, feeling the slight firmness that had not been there before, a secret growing inside her that could mean her death if anyone discovered it. The father was a human trader who had passed through their territory 6 months ago, a brief encounter of passion and foolishness that Grishka had convinced herself meant nothing. But now it meant everything, because half-breed children were abominations in the eyes of her people, and mothers who bore them were driven out into the wilderness to die or killed outright, depending on the chieftain's mood. She had watched it happen once before, when she was barely old enough to hold a blade. A warrior woman named Thokra had been discovered carrying a half-elf child, and the clan had stripped her of her weapons and armor, beaten her bloody, and cast her beyond the territorial markers with nothing but the clothes on her back. Thokra's screams had echoed through the forest for 2 days before falling silent. No one spoke of her again. That was the fate awaiting Grishka if her secret came to light, and with each passing day, her body betrayed her more thoroughly. The morning sickness had started 2 weeks ago, and she had been hiding it by claiming she had eaten spoiled meat. Her breasts were tender and swelling, which she concealed beneath her leather armor and loose tunics. Her appetite had changed, and she found herself craving things she normally despised, while foods she loved turned her stomach. Worst of all, her waist was thickening, and though the change was subtle enough that no one had noticed yet, it would not remain subtle for long. Orcs were not blind, and her clan sisters knew every line and curve of each other's bodies from years of communal bathing and shared sleeping quarters. Grishka was running out of time. She had considered trying to end the pregnancy herself. There were herbs that could cause a woman to miscarry, and old Zaga, the clan healer, kept them locked away for emergencies when a warrior woman needed to terminate a pregnancy conceived through violence or accident. But Grishka could not bring herself to steal them, could not bring herself to destroy the life growing inside her. It was not the child's fault that its existence was forbidden. It was not the child's fault that its mother had been stupid and reckless. Every time she thought about taking those herbs, her hand would drift to her belly protectively, and she would feel a fierce surge of maternal instinct that surprised her with its intensity. So instead, she began to plan her escape. It had to be subtle. If she simply disappeared one night, the clan would track her down, assuming she had been captured or killed by enemies. They would search for her, and they would find her, and then they would see her condition, and her fate would be sealed. She needed them to believe she had died, or that she had abandoned them willingly in disgrace, something shameful enough that they would not waste resources hunting her down. She needed to create a scenario where they would let her go without pursuit. The opportunity came on a cold morning in late autumn, when the hunting parties were preparing to head into the deep forest for the seasonal elk migration. Grishka volunteered for a solo scouting mission to the southern border, near the human farmlands that bordered their territory. It was dangerous work, the kind of assignment that warriors took when they wanted to prove themselves or when they had nothing left to lose. The chieftain, a scarred old warrior named Kraga with one eye and a disposition like a rabid bear, had narrowed her good eye at Grishka, but nodded approval. "You have been distracted lately," Kraga had growled, her tusks gleaming in the firelight. "Perhaps time alone in the wild will clear your head, or the humans will clear it for you permanently. Either way, the weakness leaves our clan." Grishka had bowed her head respectfully, hiding the relief that flooded through her. "I will return with honor or not at all, chieftain." "See that you do." Grishka had packed light, taking only what would be expected for a week-long scouting mission: her weapons, dried meat, a water skin, basic survival gear. She left behind everything personal, everything that might make the clan think she intended to return. She wanted them to believe she had died out there in human lands, another casualty of the endless skirmishing between their peoples. It was believable enough. Orcs died on the border constantly, and the humans rarely returned the bodies. She set out at dawn, following the forest trail southward until the dense woods began to thin and the land opened into rolling hills of farmland. The leaves were turning golden and red, and the air smelled of wood smoke and harvested grain. Grishka had been to the borderlands before on raids and patrols, but she had never paid much attention to the individual farms and homesteads. They were just targets or obstacles, places to avoid or places to attack depending on the clan's needs. Now she looked at them differently, wondering which of these human families might be desperate enough or kind enough to take in a pregnant orc woman in exchange for labor or protection. It seemed impossible. Humans hated orcs. They told stories about orc savagery, about how orcs ate human children and burned villages for sport. Some of the stories were even true. Grishka's own clan had raided human settlements during hard winters when game was scarce. She had participated in those raids, had fought and killed human men who tried to defend their homes. Why would any human help her? But she had no other options. She could not survive the winter alone in the wilderness while pregnant. She did not have the skills to build a shelter strong enough to withstand the deep snows, did not have the ability to hunt enough game to feed herself and the growing child. She would die, and the baby would die with her. At least among humans there was a chance, however slim, that someone might show mercy. She spent 3 days watching the farms from a distance, studying the patterns of life in the human territories. Most of the homesteads were clustered together for safety, with multiple families sharing land and resources. Those would be too dangerous, too many eyes, too many weapons, too much chance that someone would raise an alarm and she would be killed on sight. She needed an isolated place, somewhere far enough from neighbors that her presence might go unnoticed, at least initially. On the 4th day, she found it. The farm sat at the far southern edge of the human territory, nestled in a small valley where a creek ran clear and cold between gentle hills. It was well maintained, but clearly the work of one person, maybe 2 at most. A small wooden house with a stone chimney, a barn, a chicken coop, fields of harvested wheat stubble, and a vegetable garden that had been put to bed for the winter. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see a figure moving around the property, performing the endless tasks of farm work. Grishka watched for 2 more days, learning the rhythms of the place. The farmer was a man, human, probably in his late 20s or early 30s. He lived alone as far as she could tell, with no wife or children, no hired hands or visiting neighbors. He rose early and worked hard, tending his animals and repairing his buildings and preparing for winter. He carried himself like someone who knew how to handle work in solitude. There was something about the way he moved, economical and efficient, that suggested military training. But he wore no uniform and carried no soldier's weapons, just the typical tools of a farmer. He was her best chance. On the 6th day, as the sun was setting and the man was closing up the barn for the night, Grishka made her approach. She left her weapons hidden in the forest, except for a single knife at her belt, not wanting to appear as a threat. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to avoid this dangerous encounter with a human who had every reason to kill her. But she forced herself to keep walking, stepping out of the tree line and into the open yard of the farm. The man noticed her immediately. He froze, one hand going to the wood axe he had set down near the barn door. His eyes went wide, and Grishka could see the fear and shock on his face. She stopped about 20 paces away, far enough that she could not easily reach him, close enough that he could see she was not carrying weapons openly. "I mean no harm," she said in common, the trade language most orcs and humans shared. Her voice came out rougher than she intended, harsh with nerves and fear. The man did not move. He was tall for a human, broad-shouldered and strong from farm work. His hair was dark brown, cut short, and his face was weathered from sun and wind. He had the kind of face that might have been handsome if it were not currently frozen in an expression of wary terror. "You are a long way from orc territory," he said finally. His voice was deeper than she expected, steady despite his obvious fear. "And you are alone?" "Yes." Grishka did not know what else to say. She had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her head, but now that the moment was here, all her prepared words fled. "I need help." "Orc help." The man's tone was flat, disbelieving. "From a human. I know it sounds strange." "Strange is not the word I would use." He shifted his weight, and Grishka tensed, ready to run if he grabbed the axe. But he did not. He just stood there, studying her with sharp green eyes that took in every detail of her appearance. "Are you wounded?" "No." "Starving?" "Not yet." "Being chased?" "Not immediately." The man's eyebrows rose. Those are the only 3 reasons I can think of for an orc woman to approach a human farm alone and unarmed. If none of those apply, then what do you want? Grishka swallowed hard. This was the moment. She could lie, could make up some story about being separated from a hunting party or lost in unfamiliar territory. But lies would only carry her so far, and when her belly grew too large to hide, the truth would come out anyway. Better to be honest now, to give him all the information and let him make his choice with full knowledge. I am with child, she said quietly. The father was human. My clan will kill me if they discover this. I need a place to hide until the baby is born, and I am strong enough to move on. I will work for you in exchange. I am strong. I can help with the farm. I just need time. The silence that followed was the longest of Grishka's life. The man stared at her, his expression unreadable. She could not tell if he was going to help her or tell her to leave or simply attack her where she stood. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her belly, a protective gesture she could not suppress. Finally, the man spoke. That is the worst story I have ever heard. Grishka's heart sank. It is the truth. I believe you. That is what makes it so terrible. He rubbed a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. Do you have any idea what you are asking? If anyone finds out I am harboring an orc, let alone a pregnant orc carrying a half-breed child, they will burn my farm and probably hang me for being a traitor to humanity. I know the risks. Do you? His voice sharpened. Do you know what humans do to orcs they capture? Do you know what they will do to that child if they find it? Yes, Grishka said, and she did. She had heard the stories from orc warriors who had been captured and escaped, had seen the scars and missing fingers and broken bones. Humans were no kinder to orcs than orcs were to humans. That is why I need to hide. If I cannot, then my child and I will die. If not from the clan, then from the cold or starvation or from your people hunting us down. You are my only chance. The man was quiet again, his gaze distant, as if he were calculating odds and outcomes in his head. Grishka waited, barely breathing. She had nothing else to offer, no other bargaining chips or leverage. Her fate rested entirely in this stranger's hands. What is your name? He asked finally. Grishka. Grishka. He repeated it carefully, getting the pronunciation right on the first try. I am Cyrus Ashton. I own this farm, such as it is. I do not know if I am a good man or a fool, but I cannot send you away to die. He picked up the axe, and Grishka tensed, but he just slung it over his shoulder and turned toward the house. Come inside. It's getting cold, and we need to figure out what in all the hells we are going to do. Relief hit Grishka so hard, her knees nearly buckled. She followed Cyrus across the yard, hyper-aware of how exposed she was, how vulnerable. If this was a trap, if he was leading her inside to ambush her with hidden accomplices, she would have no defense, but she had no choice. She had gambled everything on this human's mercy, and now she would see if her gamble paid off or if she had just walked into her own execution. The inside of the house was warm and smelled of wood smoke and stew. It was a single large room with a sleeping loft overhead, simply furnished but clean and well organized. A fire burned in the stone hearth, and a pot of something that smelled delicious bubbled over the flames. Cyrus set the axe down by the door and gestured for Grishka to sit at the rough wooden table that dominated the center of the room. Are you hungry? He asked. Yes, Grishka admitted. She had been rationing her supplies, and the smell of real cooked food was almost overwhelming. Cyrus ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and brought them to the table along with a loaf of dark bread. He sat across from her, and for a moment they just ate in silence. The stew was rabbit and vegetables, simple but well seasoned, and Grishka had to force herself not to wolf it down like a starving animal. She was aware of Cyrus watching her, studying her with those sharp green eyes. How far along are you? He asked when they were halfway through the meal. 3 months, maybe a little more. And you have been hiding it from your clan this whole time? Yes, it will not be possible to hide much longer. Cyrus nodded slowly. When is the baby due? Late spring, I think. I'm not certain. Orc pregnancies are not much different from human ones in length, but I have never carried a child before. I do not know what to expect. Neither do I, Cyrus admitted. My mother died when I was young, and I never married. I know more about birthing lambs than babies. Despite everything, Grishka felt a small smile tug at her lips. I have delivered foals and calves. Perhaps the principle is similar. Perhaps. Cyrus finished his stew and leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Here's what I propose. You can stay here through the winter and until the child is born. You will sleep in the barn loft where it is warm and hidden. During the day, you will help me with the farm work as much as your condition allows. If anyone comes by, which is rare this time of year, you will hide. When spring comes and you are recovered from the birth, we will figure out what happens next. Does that sound acceptable? More than acceptable, Grishka said, relief flooding through her again. Thank you. I know I am asking much and I have no way to repay you. You will repay me with work, Cyrus said firmly. I'm not doing this out of pure charity. Winter on a farm is brutal, and an extra set of hands will make things easier for both of us. Just do not make me regret this. I will not, Grishka promised. You have my word. The word of an orc, Cyrus said, but there was no mockery in his tone, just a kind of wry acknowledgement of how strange this situation was. I suppose we will see what that is worth. They finished the meal, and Cyrus showed her to the barn. He had not been lying about it being warm. The animals, 2 cows and a horse and a small flock of chickens, generated enough body heat to keep the interior comfortable. The loft was full of hay and straw, and he helped her arrange it into a comfortable sleeping area, then brought her blankets from the house. There is a well in the yard for water, he said. The outhouse is behind the barn. If you need anything during the night, knock on the house door, but quietly. Sound carries out here, and I do not want to attract attention. I understand. Cyrus hesitated at the top of the ladder, looking like he wanted to say something else. Finally, he just nodded and climbed back down, leaving Grishka alone in the loft. She listened to his footsteps crossing the yard, heard the house door close, and then there was only the gentle sound of the animals below and the wind outside. Grishka lay down in the hay and stared up at the dark beams of the barn roof. She had done it. She had found shelter. She had bought herself time. It did not solve all her problems, not by a long shot, but it was more than she had dared hope for. For the first time in months, she felt like she might actually survive this, like her child might have a chance at life. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the slight curve there, imagining the tiny life growing inside her. We are going to be all right, she whispered to the darkness. I promise you, we are going to be all right. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Grishka rose with the sun and helped Cyrus with the endless work of the farm. She fed the animals and mucked out the stalls and repaired fences and hauled water and split wood. The work was hard but satisfying in a way that hunting and fighting had never been. There was a simple honesty to farm labor, a direct connection between effort and result that appealed to her. Cyrus was a good teacher, patient and clear in his explanations. He showed her how to milk the cows, how to collect eggs from the chickens without getting pecked, how to maintain the tools and equipment. He treated her not as an orc or an enemy, but as a fellow worker, someone who was there to help him survive the winter. It was strange and unfamiliar and oddly comforting. They did not talk much at first. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, communicating with gestures and short instructions. But gradually, as the days passed and they grew more accustomed to each other's presence, conversations began to happen. Small things at first, comments about the weather or the animals or the work that needed doing. Then deeper things, stories about their pasts, their families, their lives before this strange arrangement. Grishka learned that Cyrus had been a soldier before he was a farmer. He had served in the king's army for 8 years, fighting in the border wars against orc clans and human bandits, and occasionally the strange creatures that emerged from the deep wilderness. He had been good at it, had risen to the rank of sergeant, but he had grown tired of the killing and the politics and the waste of it all. When his term of service ended, he had taken his military pay and bought this remote farm, as far from the wars as he could get while still remaining in civilized lands. I wanted peace, he said one evening as they were bringing firewood into the house. I wanted to build something instead of destroying things. I wanted to wake up and not wonder if today was the day I would die or be forced to kill someone. Do you regret it? Grishka asked. Leaving the army? Some days, Cyrus admitted, when the work is hard and the loneliness is worse, but mostly no. This is a better life, a quieter life. Until a pregnant orc woman showed up in your yard, Cyrus laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. Yes, that did complicate the peace and quiet somewhat. Grishka told him about her own life, about growing up in the clan, about the constant pressure to prove herself as a warrior, about the rigid hierarchies and brutal traditions that governed Orc society. She told him about the shame of what she had done, sleeping with a human traitor during a moment of weakness and loneliness. She told him about her fear when she realized she was pregnant, about the impossible choice between her people and her child. "I do not regret the baby," she said firmly. "I regret the circumstances, but not the baby. That probably makes me a terrible Orc." "It makes you a mother," Cyrus said quietly. "That is not a terrible thing." As the weeks passed and winter settled in with snow and cold, Grishka's belly continued to grow. It became harder to hide, even in the loose tunics and layers of clothing she wore against the cold. Cyrus pretended not to notice, but she caught him glancing at her sometimes when he thought she was not looking, his expression thoughtful and unreadable. The pregnancy was progressing normally as far as she could tell. The morning sickness had faded, replaced by a constant low-level hunger and occasional bouts of exhaustion. Her body was changing in ways that were both fascinating and frightening. Her breasts were larger and tender, her hips were widening, and she could feel the baby moving inside her now, little flutters and kicks that made her breath catch with wonder. One snowy afternoon in late winter, when they were both in the barn doing repairs, Grishka felt a particularly strong kick. She gasped and pressed a hand to her belly, and Cyrus looked up from the stall door he was fixing. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Grishka said, smiling despite herself. "The baby is just very active today." Cyrus set down his hammer and walked over to her. "Can you feel it moving?" "Yes? Do you want to?" The words were out before she could think about them, an impulse of shared wonder that overrode her usual caution. Cyrus hesitated, then nodded. Grishka took his hand and placed it on her belly where the baby was kicking. They stood there in silence, Cyrus's hand warm against her stomach through the fabric of her tunic. After a moment, the baby kicked again, a strong thump against Cyrus's palm. His eyes went wide. "That is amazing." "It is strange," Grishka said, "like there is another person inside me, someone I have never met but already love more than anything." Cyrus looked up at her and their eyes met. Something passed between them in that moment, some recognition or connection that made Grishka's heart skip. Then Cyrus pulled his hand back and turned away, busying himself with the repairs again. "We should get this door fixed before it gets dark," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes," Grishka agreed, though her hand remained on her belly where his had been, still feeling the warmth of his touch. After that, something changed between them. The easy companionship they had developed gained an undercurrent of awareness, a tension that was not quite uncomfortable, but was definitely present. Grishka found herself watching Cyrus more often, noticing things about him she had not paid attention to before. The way his hands moved with such capable confidence when he worked. The small smile he got when one of the cows did something amusing. The serious, focused expression he wore when he was thinking hard about a problem. She tried to tell herself it was just gratitude, just the natural bond that formed between people who relied on each other for survival. But she knew it was more than that. She was attracted to him, drawn to his quiet strength and his kindness and the way he treated her like a person rather than a monster. It was foolish and dangerous and complicated, but she could not seem to stop herself from feeling it. Cyrus gave no indication of whether he felt anything similar. He remained polite and distant, friendly, but never more than that. If he was attracted to her, he hid it well. Grishka told herself that was for the best. She was already carrying one human's child, already in an impossible situation. Romance would only make things more complicated. But late at night, lying alone in the barn loft with her hand on her growing belly, she let herself imagine what it might be like if things were different, if she were not an orc and he were not a human, if they had met in some other life where their peoples were not enemies, if they could simply be two people who cared about each other without all the weight of history and prejudice crushing down on them. It was a useless fantasy, but she held on to it anyway, a small light in the darkness of her uncertain future. The winter deepened, and snow piled high around the farm. They spent more time indoors, Grishka in the barn and Cyrus in the house, only venturing out for necessary chores and to move between buildings. The isolation was total. No one traveled in weather like this, and the nearest neighbor was miles away over treacherous roads. For all practical purposes, they were alone in the world, two souls clinging to survival in the frozen wilderness. One particularly brutal night, when the wind howled like a living thing and the cold was so intense it hurt to breathe, Cyrus appeared at the barn door with extra blankets and a jug of hot cider. "The temperature is dropping fast," he said, climbing up to the loft. "I wanted to make sure you have enough to stay warm." "I am fine," Grishka said, though in truth she'd been shivering under her blankets. Orcs were hardier than humans in many ways, but everyone had their limits. "You're not fine. You're shivering." Cyrus spread the extra blankets over her and handed her the jug. "Drink this. It will help." The cider was sweet and spiced, warming her from the inside out. Cyrus sat down on the hay beside her, and they passed the jug back and forth in silence. Outside, the wind screamed and the barn creaked under the assault of the storm. "This reminds me of a winter campaign I was on once," Cyrus said after a while. "We were holed up in an abandoned fort, surrounded by enemies, with supplies running low and half the men sick with fever. The commander wanted to make a break for it, but I convinced him to wait out the storm. We lost 3 men to the cold, but if we had tried to march, we would have lost everyone." "You saved your unit," Grishka said. "I made a hard choice that happened to work out." Cyrus took another sip of cider. "If the storm had lasted another week, we all would have died anyway, and it would have been my fault. But it did not last another week. You made the right choice." "Maybe?" Cyrus was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever think about the people you have killed, when you were raiding with your clan?" The question caught Grishka off guard. "Yes," she said finally. "Not often, but sometimes. Mostly I remember their faces, the way they looked at me before they died, afraid, angry. Sometimes just resigned, like they knew this was how things would end." "I remember their faces too," Cyrus said quietly. "I tell myself it was war, that I was following orders, that it was kill or be killed, and all of that is true. But they still haunt me sometimes, all those people who would still be alive if I had been slower or less skilled or just somewhere else that day." "Is that why you became a farmer? To stop adding to the haunting?" "Partly. Also because I wanted to build a life where I could sleep at night without seeing their faces." He turned to look at her, his green eyes reflecting the dim light of the lantern. "You understand that, I think. You ran away from your clan because you could not bear to lose another person, the baby. You chose life over tradition." "I chose my child over my people," Grishka said. "That makes me a coward and a traitor." "It makes you a mother," Cyrus repeated what he had said before. "There's nothing cowardly about trying to protect your child." Grishka felt tears stinging her eyes, an embarrassing display of weakness. She turned her face away, but Cyrus reached out and gently turned it back. His hand was warm against her cheek, calloused from work but gentle in its touch. "You're not a coward," he said firmly. "You're one of the bravest people I have ever met." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Grishka could feel her heart pounding, could see the way Cyrus's eyes had darkened, the way his breathing had quickened slightly. It would be so easy to close the distance between them, to let this connection that had been building for months finally break through the surface. But before either of them could move, a loud crack echoed through the barn, and they both jumped. One of the support beams had shifted under the weight of snow on the roof, settling with a groan but holding. The spell was broken. Cyrus pulled his hand back and stood up quickly. "I should get back to the house before the snow gets worse," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Stay warm. I will check on you in the morning." He was gone before Grishka could respond, climbing down the ladder and disappearing into the storm. She sat there in the hay, her hand on her cheek where he had touched her, wondering what would have happened if that beam had not cracked, if they had not been interrupted. Probably nothing, she told herself. Probably it was better this way. But she could not quite make herself believe it. The storm lasted 3 days, and when it finally cleared, the world was buried under snow. They spent a week digging out, clearing paths between the buildings, shoveling the barn roof, breaking ice on the well, and checking on the animals. The work was exhausting, and Grishka's growing belly made it harder, but she pushed through. She needed to earn her keep, needed to prove she was worth the risk Cyrus was taking by sheltering her. They did not talk about that night in the barn, about the moment they had almost shared. They fell back into their working routine, polite and distant, as if nothing had happened. Grishka told herself she was relieved, but late at night she found herself thinking about the warmth of his hand on her face, the look in his eyes, the possibility of something more. As winter turned toward spring, Grishka's pregnancy became impossible to hide. Her belly was large and round, and the baby was active constantly, kicking and turning inside her. She could no longer do heavy lifting, and bending over was difficult. Cyrus took on more of the physical work without complaint, and he began preparing for the birth with a seriousness that touched her. He rode to a nearby town during an early thaw and returned with medical supplies, clean cloth for bandages, and several books about childbirth and infant care. He read them carefully in the evenings, making notes and asking Grishka questions about orc physiology and whether there were differences in how orc women gave birth. "I do not know," Grishka admitted. "Women in my clan did not talk much about childbirth. It was considered a private matter, something the midwives handled away from the rest of the clan." "Then we will assume it is similar to human birth and hope for the best," Cyrus said. "I will do everything I can to make sure you and the baby survive this." "Why?" Grishka asked suddenly. "Why are you doing all this? You could have turned me away that first night. You could have killed me and no one would have blamed you. Why are you helping me?" Cyrus was quiet for a long time, his eyes on the book in his hands. Finally, he looked up at her. "I spent 8 years killing people I did not know for reasons that never made sense to me. When you showed up at my farm, desperate and afraid and asking for help, I had a choice. I could be the same kind of person I had been, someone who turned away from suffering because it was inconvenient or dangerous, or I could be someone different, someone better." "So you are using me to redeem yourself?" Grishka could not keep the edge out of her voice. "No." Cyrus met her eyes steadily. "I am helping you because it is the right thing to do, because you asked for help, and I had the ability to give it, because that baby deserves a chance at life, and so do you. If that helps me sleep better at night, then that is just a fortunate side effect." Grishka felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for not turning me away. You have already thanked me, many times. You do not need to keep thanking me. I do, though, because I do not know how to repay this debt." "There is no debt," Cyrus said firmly. "You have worked hard. You have more than earned your place here. When the baby is born and you are ready to move on, you will leave with no obligations. That is the arrangement." Grishka nodded, but something in her chest ached at his words. The idea of leaving, of taking her baby and walking away from this farm and from Cyrus, felt wrong in a way she could not quite articulate. This place had become home. Cyrus had become important to her. The thought of never seeing him again was painful. But what was the alternative? She could not stay here forever. Eventually, someone would discover her presence, and then Cyrus would be in danger. Or her clan would find out she was still alive and come looking for her. Or the baby would grow old enough to ask questions about its father and its heritage, questions Grishka had no idea how to answer. There were too many complications, too many ways this could go wrong. Better to leave while she still could, to take her child and disappear into the wilderness or the human lands, to build a new life somewhere far away where no one knew her history. It was the smart choice, the safe choice. So why did it feel like the wrong choice? Spring came slowly, the snow melting in patches to reveal muddy ground and the first green shoots of new growth. The animals grew more active, and the farm work increased as they prepared the fields for planting and tended to the newborn animals. Grishka's belly was enormous now, and she moved slowly and carefully, always aware of the weight she carried. The baby would come soon. She could feel it in the way her body was changing, the way the child had dropped lower in her pelvis, the way her back ached constantly and her ankles swelled. Cyrus watched her with increasing concern, hovering nearby whenever she moved around the farm, ready to catch her if she stumbled. "I'm not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he insisted she sit down after she had been standing for only a few minutes. "I know, but you are 9 months pregnant and carrying a child that might be larger than average, given that orc babies tend to be bigger than human babies. I would rather be too cautious than have you fall and hurt yourself or the baby." "Orc women work right up until they give birth," Grishka said, but she sat down anyway because her back was killing her. We do not treat pregnancy like an illness. Maybe not, but you are not in your clan anymore. You are here, and here we take care of each other. That means you rest when you need to rest." Grishka wanted to argue, but she was too tired and too uncomfortable. She leaned back against the barn wall and closed her eyes, feeling the baby moving inside her. "How much longer do you think?" "The books say the baby will come when it is ready. Could be days, could be weeks." "Very helpful," Cyrus smiled. "You are the one who wanted to have a baby. I'm just trying to help you not die in the process. Your encouragement is overwhelming. I do my best." He sat down beside her in the hay, and they were quiet for a while, listening to the sounds of the farm around them. "Are you scared?" Grishka opened her eyes and looked at him. "Yes. I have seen animals give birth. I know it is painful and dangerous. I know things can go wrong. And I will be doing this without a midwife or a healer, just you and your books." "I will do everything I can," Cyrus said seriously. "I promise you, I will not let you die if there is any way to prevent it." "I know." And she did know. She trusted him completely, trusted him with her life and her baby's life in a way she had never trusted anyone before. "I'm still scared." "That's probably smart. Fear keeps you careful." He hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. His fingers laced through hers, warm and strong. "But you are not alone. I will be with you every step of the way." Grishka squeezed his hand, feeling the now familiar flutter in her chest that happened whenever they touched. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve goodness," Cyrus said simply. "Because everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, regardless of whether they are human or orc or anything else. Most people do not believe that. Most people are wrong about a lot of things." They sat there in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the sun set over the fields. Grishka felt the baby kick again, a strong thump that made her wince. Cyrus noticed and placed his free hand on her belly, feeling the movement. "Strong kick," he observed. "The baby is going to be a warrior, I think. Never stops moving. Or a dancer. Or someone who just has a lot of energy." Cyrus's hand lingered on her belly, his thumb tracing small circles through the fabric of her tunic. "Have you thought about names?" "Not really. In my clan, babies are named by the chieftain when they are a week old, but I will not have a chieftain to name this child." "Then you will have to choose a name yourself." Cyrus was quiet for a moment. "If it is a girl, you could call her something that means strength or courage. If it is a boy, something that means hope or new beginnings. I do not know any names that mean those things. I have a book with names and their meanings. I will show you later, and you can choose something you like." "Thank you." Grishka leaned her head against his shoulder without thinking, and Cyrus stiffened slightly but did not pull away. They sat like that as the sun disappeared and the stars came out, two people from different worlds finding comfort in each other's presence. The contractions started 3 days later, in the early morning when Grishka was feeding the chickens. At first, she thought it was just the usual aches and pains of late pregnancy, but then the pain sharpened and tightened around her belly in a way that was unmistakable. She dropped the bucket of feed and gripped the fence post, breathing through the contraction. Cyrus was at her side immediately. "Is it time?" "I think so." Grishka gasped as another contraction hit, stronger than the first. "Yes, it is time." Cyrus helped her into the house and got her settled on the bed he had prepared for the birth. He had been planning for this for weeks, gathering supplies and reading his medical books and setting up everything they would need. Now he moved with calm efficiency, boiling water and laying out clean cloth and checking on Grishka every few minutes. The labor was long and brutal. The contractions came in waves, each one more intense than the last, until Grishka could not think about anything except the pain and the desperate need to push. Cyrus stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with cool cloths and encouraging her in a steady, calm voice. "You're doing great," he said during a brief break between contractions. "The baby is coming. I can see the head. Just a little more, Grishka. You're almost there." Grishka wanted to scream at him that it was easy for him to say when he was not the one being torn apart, but she did not have the breath. Another contraction hit, and she bore down with all her strength, feeling the baby moving through the birth canal. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined, a white-hot agony that consumed her entire world. And then, suddenly, there was relief. The baby slid free in a rush of fluid and blood, and Cyrus was there to catch it, his hands sure and gentle. Grishka collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and shaking, as the sound of crying filled the room. "It is a girl," Cyrus said, his voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful, healthy girl." He cleaned the baby quickly and wrapped her in soft cloth, then placed her in Grishka's arms. Grishka looked down at her daughter and felt her heart crack open with love. The baby was small and wrinkled and perfect, with green skin a shade lighter than Grishka's own and tiny pointed ears. Her eyes were closed, and she was wailing at the top of her lungs, angry at being thrust into the cold world. "Hello, little one," Grishka whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my daughter, my brave, strong daughter." Cyrus finished delivering the afterbirth and cleaned up the worst of the mess, then sat down on the edge of the bed. He reached out and gently touched the baby's cheek with one finger, and the infant quieted slightly, turning toward his touch. "She is beautiful," he said softly. "She has your eyes. Well, she will when she opens them properly." "She has my skin and ears too," Grishka said. "But her face, I think she has a human look around the mouth and nose. She is truly half and half." "She is perfect," Cyrus said firmly. "Have you thought about a name?" Grishka looked at her daughter, at this tiny person she had carried for 9 months and fought to protect. "Kira," she said finally. "It means light in the old orc tongue. She is my light in the darkness." "Kira," Cyrus repeated, smiling. "It is a good name. Welcome to the world, Kira." The baby opened her eyes then, just for a moment, and Grishka gasped. One eye was green like hers, the other was a lighter hazel, almost gold. Heterochromia, proof of her mixed heritage written in her very gaze. She was marked as a half-breed in a way that could never be hidden. "She will have a hard life," Grishka said quietly. "Neither human nor orc, not fully accepted by either people." "Maybe," Cyrus said, "or maybe she will be the first of a new kind of people, the bridge between two worlds. We cannot know the future, Grishka. All we can do is love her and protect her and give her the best chance we can." "We?" Grishka looked up at him sharply. Cyrus met her eyes. "I have been thinking a lot these past few months, about you and the baby and what happens next. I know we agreed that you would leave after the birth, but I do not want you to go." Grishka's heart began to pound. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying stay, both of you. Stay here. Let me help you raise Kira. Let us build a life together, the three of us." He took her hand, his grip warm and firm. "I know it is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I do not care. These past months with you have been the happiest I can remember. You make me laugh. You challenge me. You make this isolated farm feel like a home instead of just a place to exist. And I have fallen in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Grishka stared at him, her mind racing. "You love me?" "Yes. I have been trying not to, trying to keep things professional and distant, but I cannot help it. I love you, Grishka. I love your strength and your courage, and the way you care for the animals, and the fierce way you protect your child. I love the sound of your laugh, and the way you argue with me about the best way to repair a fence. I love you, and I want you to stay." Grishka felt tears welling up again. "I am an orc. You are human. Our peoples are enemies. I do not care about peoples. I care about you and Kira. That is all that matters to me. If anyone finds out, they will kill you. They will kill all of us. Then we will be careful. We will keep Kira hidden when necessary. We will tell people she is my niece or a foundling I took in. We will lie and hide and do whatever we have to do to keep her safe. But we will do it together." Cyrus's eyes were intense, pleading. "Please, Grishka, stay. Build a life with me. Let me be a father to Kira. Let me be yours." Grishka looked down at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought about the alternative, about taking Kira and wandering alone through the wilderness, trying to find a place where they would be safe and accepted. She thought about how much harder it would be to raise a child alone, without help or support or someone to share the burden. And she thought about how much she loved Cyrus, how much she had come to depend on him, how much she wanted to stay in this place that had become home. Yes, she said finally, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. Yes, I will stay. We will stay. Together. Cyrus's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. He leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and sweet, his hand cradling the back of her head. It was nothing like the rough passion of her encounter with the traitor, nothing like the aggressive courtship rituals of orc warriors. It was tender and loving and full of promise. When they broke apart, Grishka was laughing and crying at the same time. "You are insane. This is never going to work." "Probably not," Cyrus agreed, still smiling. "But we can try. That is all anyone can do. Try and hope and work hard to make things better." "I love you too," Grishka said, realizing it was true. "I have loved you for a while now, I think. I was just too afraid to admit it." "No more fear," Cyrus said, kissing her forehead. "From now on, we face things together." Baby Kira chose that moment to wake up and start crying, demanding food with the imperious wail of a newborn. Grishka laughed and adjusted her tunic to nurse, and Cyrus sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, watching as his new daughter latched on and began to feed. "Our daughter," he said softly. "I know I am not her blood father, but if you will let me, I will be her father in every way that matters." "I would like that," Grishka said, leaning into his warmth. "She needs a father. We both need you. And I need both of you." Cyrus pressed a kiss to the top of Grishka's head. "My family. My strange, wonderful, impossible family." They sat together in the quiet house, the fire crackling in the hearth, and for the first time since she realized she was pregnant, Grishka felt truly at peace. The future was still uncertain and dangerous, still full of challenges and threats, but she was not facing it alone anymore. She had Cyrus and Kira and this small farm in the middle of nowhere, and somehow that was enough. The spring deepened into summer, and life on the farm fell into a new rhythm. Kira grew rapidly, as half-orc babies tended to do, strong and healthy and demanding. Grishka recovered from the birth more quickly than a human woman would have, her orc constitution giving her strength and resilience. Within a few weeks, she was back to helping with the farm work, though now she had to balance labor with caring for an infant. Cyrus was endlessly patient with both of them. He helped with Kira in the night when she woke crying, walking her around the house and singing to her in his deep, off-key voice until she settled. He took over the heavier farm work without complaint, insisting that Grishka rest and recover. He brought her food and water and made sure she had everything she needed. More than that, he was present in a way Grishka had never experienced before. He listened when she talked, really listened, and he asked questions and cared about her opinions. He did not try to dominate or control her. He treated her as an equal partner, someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered. It was strange and wonderful and occasionally uncomfortable. Grishka was not used to being treated this way. In her clan, strength and dominance were everything. Affection was shown through fighting prowess and hunting success, not through gentle words and patient understanding. She had to learn a whole new language of love, one based on partnership rather than conquest. Cyrus was patient with that too, never pushing but always there, ready to catch her when she stumbled. They had to be careful about visitors, which fortunately were rare. A few times during the summer, neighbors stopped by to trade goods or borrow tools. When that happened, Grishka would hide in the barn with Kira, staying perfectly still and quiet until the visitors left. Cyrus would explain that he was a solitary man who preferred his own company, and most people accepted that without question. Former soldiers who became hermit farmers were not uncommon in the frontier. Once, a patrol of the king's soldiers came through, checking the border farms for orc activity. Grishka watched from the loft window as Cyrus spoke with them, his manner easy and relaxed, giving no indication that he was harboring exactly what they were hunting for. The soldiers asked a few questions, accepted a drink of water, and moved on. When they were gone, Cyrus came to the barn, and Grishka saw that his hands were shaking. "That was too close," he said, pulling her into his arms. "If they had searched the barn, if Kira had cried at the wrong moment. But they did not. And she did not," Grishka said, holding him tight. "We were lucky. Luck runs out eventually. Then we will be careful. We will prepare. We will do whatever we have to do to keep our family safe." Cyrus nodded against her shoulder. "I worry about you. About both of you. Every time someone comes to the farm, I am terrified they will discover you. I know, I am terrified too. But we chose this life, and we will make it work." "You are right." Cyrus pulled back and kissed her, fierce and desperate. "I love you. I love both of you so much." "We love you too," Grishka said, and she meant it with every part of her being. As summer turned to autumn, Kira grew from a newborn into an infant who was alert and curious and startlingly intelligent. Her mixed heritage was evident in every aspect of her appearance and development. She had Grishka's green skin and pointed ears, but her features were softer, more human. She had those striking mismatched eyes, one green and one hazel. She was stronger than a human baby, but not as strong as a pure orc infant would be. She was perfect, and both Grishka and Cyrus adored her. They fell into a pattern of domestic life that felt surreal in its normalcy. Cyrus would work the fields while Grishka tended to the animals in the house, Kira strapped to her back in a sling. They would eat meals together, talking about the day and making plans for the future. They would put Kira to bed and then sit by the fire, Grishka's head on Cyrus's shoulder, content in each other's presence. They were a family in every way that mattered, though they had never formalized their relationship with any kind of ceremony. There were no priests who would marry an orc and a human, no officials who would recognize their union as legitimate, but they did not need outside validation. They had each other, and that was enough. One evening in late autumn, as they were sitting by the fire after Kira had gone to sleep, Cyrus suddenly got up and went to a chest in the corner of the room. He rummaged around for a moment, then came back with a small wooden box. "I have been meaning to give you this," he said, sitting down beside her. "I am not sure if orcs have the same tradition, but among humans, when two people decide to spend their lives together, they exchange rings as a symbol of their commitment." He opened the box to reveal two simple silver bands, unadorned but beautifully crafted. Grishka stared at them, her heart in her throat. "I cannot give you a wedding in a temple or a celebration with friends and family," Cyrus continued. "I cannot give you any of the things that a human bride would expect, but I can give you this promise. I will love you for the rest of my life. I will stand by you through whatever comes. I will be a father to Kira and any other children we might have. I will be yours, completely and forever, if you will be mine." Grishka took one of the rings, feeling the weight of it in her palm. "In my clan, warriors who wanted to bond would exchange weapons. It was a practical gesture, a symbol of trust and partnership, but we were not allowed to bond with humans. It was forbidden." "Do you care about what was forbidden?" Cyrus asked gently. "No." Grishka slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Not anymore. I care about what is right, and this feels right. You and me and Kira. This is my family now. My clan." Cyrus smiled and slipped the other ring onto his own finger. Then he took her hands in his, and in the firelight of their small home, they spoke their vows to each other. Simple words, but weighted with meaning and love and the promise of a shared future. "I will love you," Grishka said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I will fight for you and for our family. I will build a life with you that is worth living. I will be yours, Cyrus Ashton, until my last breath." "I will love you," Cyrus echoed. "I will protect you and Kira with everything I have. I will make this farm a home where you are safe and cherished. I will be yours, Grishka, until my last breath." They sealed their vows with a kiss, and in that moment, Grishka felt the last of her old life fall away. She was no longer Grishka of the clan, the warrior who had shamed herself and fled. She was Grishka Ashton, wife and mother and partner, building a new life in a new world. The winter came again, their second winter together, and it was easier than the first. They knew each other's rhythms now, knew how to work together and how to support each other through the hard times. Kira was crawling and getting into everything, a ball of energy and curiosity that kept them both on their toes. One snowy afternoon, Cyrus came in from the barn with a worried expression. "There are tracks in the woods north of the property. Large tracks, probably orc." Grishka's blood went cold. "How many?" "At least 3, maybe more. They are moving east, parallel to the border. Probably a hunting party." "My clan," Grishka said, feeling the old fear rising up. "They range this far sometimes in winter when game is scarce." "Will they come to the farm?" "Probably not. Orcs avoid human settlements during winter. Too much risk of a fight when resources are already thin. But if they see smoke from our chimney, if they decide to investigate..." She did not need to finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen if her clan found her. Then we will be ready, Cyrus said, moving to the weapons rack where he kept his old military equipment. I will not let them take you or Kira. I will die before I let that happen. It will not come to that, Grishka said, though she was not sure she believed it. We will be careful. We will keep watch. If they come close, we will hide. For 3 days they lived in a state of heightened alert. Cyrus kept his sword close at all times, and Grishka stayed inside with Kira, ready to barricade themselves in the root cellar if necessary. They took turns keeping watch at the windows, looking for any sign of movement in the forest. On the 3rd night, Grishka saw them. 4 orc warriors moving through the trees, their forms barely visible in the moonlight. They were headed toward the farm, and Grishka's heart nearly stopped. She recognized one of them, a warrior named Chakra, who had been her training partner when they were young. If Chakra got close enough to see her, there would be no hiding. They are coming, she whispered to Cyrus. 4 warriors. We need to get Kira to the cellar. Cyrus moved immediately, scooping up Kira and heading for the trapdoor in the floor. Grishka helped him pull it open and climbed down after him, pulling the door shut behind them. They huddled in the darkness, Kira pressed between them, and waited. Footsteps crossed the yard above them, voices speaking in the orc tongue, harsh and guttural. Grishka held her breath, every muscle tensed. Kira stirred, starting to fuss, and Grishka quickly pressed her to her breast to keep her quiet. Cyrus's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing tight. The orcs were at the door now, pounding on it. Grishka heard Chakra's voice calling out in common. Human, we know you are in there. We need food and shelter for the night. Open the door. There was a long pause, and then the sound of the door being forced open. Footsteps moved through the house above them, heavy and deliberate. Grishka could hear the orcs searching, opening chests and cupboards, taking whatever they wanted. She pressed her face against Kira's soft hair and prayed to gods she did not believe in that the orcs would not find the cellar door. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, she heard Chakra's voice again. No one home. Take what we can carry and move on. The human probably ran when he saw us coming. More sounds of movement, things being packed and carried. Then the footsteps moved away, out the door and across the yard. Grishka listened to them fade into the distance, not daring to move or breathe. Only when the forest was silent again did she allow herself to relax. They are gone, she whispered. Are you sure? Yes, they would not linger. Too risky. They climbed out of the cellar to find the house ransacked. The orcs had taken food, blankets, and anything else they thought might be useful. But they had not found the cellar, and they had not burned the house down, which meant they had not realized an orc trader was living here. That was too close, Cyrus said, surveying the damage. If Kira had cried, if they had found the cellar. But they did not, Grishka said, though her hands were shaking. We were lucky again. How long can our luck hold? It was the question they had both been avoiding. Eventually, someone would discover their secret. Eventually, they would be found out. They could not hide forever. I do not know, Grishka admitted, but we will take each day as it comes. We will protect each other and Kira, and we will hope that is enough. Cyrus pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I am afraid, he said quietly. I'm afraid of losing you. Both of you. I'm afraid too, Grishka said, but we are stronger together. We will survive this. We have to. They stood there in the wreckage of their home, holding each other and their daughter, drawing strength from their closeness. And somehow, despite everything, Grishka felt hope. They had survived this encounter. They would survive the next one. They would find a way to make this work, because the alternative was unthinkable. The winter passed without further incident, and spring came again, bringing warmth and new growth. Kira took her first steps in the muddy yard, laughing with delight as Grishka and Cyrus cheered her on. She was growing so fast, already speaking a few words in both the orc tongue and common. She was a bright, happy child, loved and cherished, unaware of how precarious her existence was. As the planting season began, Cyrus and Grishka worked side by side in the fields, Kira playing nearby under a shady tree. It was peaceful work, meditative in its rhythm. Grishka found herself thinking about the future, about what would happen when Kira was old enough to ask questions about why she looked different from other children, why she had to hide when visitors came. We need to think about Kira's future, she said one evening as they were putting her to bed. She cannot hide forever. Eventually, she will want to see the world, to be around other people. What do we tell her? The truth, Cyrus said, that she is special, that she is the product of two worlds, and that makes her unique and valuable, that we love her and will protect her, but that there are people who would not understand or accept her. That is a heavy burden for a child. It is, but she is strong, like her mother. She will handle it. Grishka hoped he was right. She wanted to believe that Kira would grow up confident and secure, that the love of her parents would be enough to shield her from the prejudice and hatred of the wider world. But she knew that was naive. The world was cruel to those who were different, and Kira would face that cruelty eventually. All they could do was prepare her as best they could and hope it was enough. The months passed, and Grishka and Cyrus continued to build their life together. They expanded the farm, adding more animals and planting a larger garden. They made improvements to the house, building an addition that gave them more space. They were careful and cautious, always alert for danger, but they also allowed themselves moments of joy and happiness. Kira grew into a bright, energetic toddler who was fascinated by everything around her. She followed Grishka around the farm, mimicking her work and asking endless questions. She climbed into Cyrus's lap every evening and demanded stories, her mismatched eyes wide with wonder. She was the center of their world, the reason they worked so hard to make this impossible situation work. One warm summer evening, as they were sitting outside watching the sunset, Cyrus turned to Grishka with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "We have been lucky so far. No one has discovered us, and we have managed to stay hidden. But luck does not last forever. We need a backup plan, somewhere we can go if things go wrong here." "Where would we go?" Grishka asked. "There is nowhere that would accept us." "There are places," Cyrus said slowly. "Remote villages in the mountains where people ask fewer questions. Coastal towns where half-breeds are more common because of the trading ships. The far frontier where the king's law does not reach and people are too busy surviving to care about prejudice. We would have to start over. But we could do it." Grishka considered this. "You would leave your farm? The land you worked so hard to build?" "For you and Kira." Without hesitation. Cyrus took her hand. "This place is just land and buildings. You two are my home. If we have to leave, we will leave together, and we will build something new wherever we end up." Grishka felt tears welling up. "I do not deserve you." "Yes, you do. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Cyrus kissed her gently. "We will make this work, Grishka. Whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," she agreed. They made plans quietly and carefully. Cyrus set aside money and supplies in hidden caches, preparing for the possibility that they might need to flee quickly. He taught Grishka about the geography of the surrounding lands, about where they could go and who might help them. They practiced emergency drills with Kira, teaching her to be quiet and hide when danger came. It felt paranoid and excessive, but it also felt necessary. They were living on borrowed time, and they both knew it. All they could do was prepare and hope that when the crisis came, they would be ready. That crisis came on a hot afternoon in late summer when Kira was nearly 2 years old. Grishka was in the garden harvesting vegetables when she heard the sound of horses approaching. She looked up to see a group of riders coming up the road toward the farm, wearing the colors of the King's Guard. Terror seized her. She grabbed Kira and ran for the barn, her heart pounding. This was not a casual patrol. This was a deliberate visit, and that meant someone had talked, someone had raised suspicions. Cyrus met her at the barn door, his face pale. "Get to the cellar, now. Do not come out until I come for you or until you hear 3 knocks. Pause, then 2 more knocks. That will be the signal that it is safe." "Cyrus, go!" He pushed her toward the house, then turned to face the approaching riders. Grishka ran with Kira clutched to her chest, getting them into the cellar and pulling the door shut just as she heard voices in the yard. She held Kira close, one hand over her daughter's mouth to keep her quiet, and listened to the conversation above. "Cyrus Ashton?" A man's voice, authoritative and cold. "That is me. What can I do for you, Captain?" "We have received reports of orc activity in this area. Sightings of a female orc possibly living among humans. You would not happen to know anything about that?" "No, sir. I have seen orc hunting parties pass through occasionally, but they do not come near the farm. I'm just a farmer trying to make a living out here. A farmer who used to be a soldier. A sergeant, if I recall correctly." Good reputation, honorable discharge. That is correct. Then I am sure you understand the seriousness of consorting with the enemy. Orcs are monsters. They are not to be trusted or befriended. Anyone found harboring an orc would be guilty of treason. I understand that, sir. But I have not harbored any orcs. You are welcome to search the property if you do not believe me. There was a pause, and Grishka's heart nearly stopped. If they searched, they would find the cellar. They would find her and Kira. It would be over. That will not be necessary, the captain said finally. But we will be keeping an eye on this area. If you see anything suspicious, report it immediately. Of course, sir. The sound of horses moving away. Grishka waited, not daring to breathe until she heard the signal. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. She pushed open the cellar door to find Cyrus standing there, looking shaken but unharmed. They are gone, he said, but someone has been talking. Someone suspects. Then we need to leave, Grishka said. We need to go now before they come back with a warrant to search. Cyrus nodded. I will get our supplies, pack only what we can carry. We leave at nightfall. They moved with practiced efficiency, gathering the hidden caches Cyrus had prepared, packing food and clothes and money. Grishka felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the home they were leaving behind, the life they had built. Relief that they were finally taking action, finally moving toward something instead of just hiding. As the sun set, they loaded everything onto the wagon and hitched up the horse. Kira was strapped to Grishka's back, sleeping peacefully, unaware that her whole world was changing. Cyrus took one last look at the farm, his expression sad but determined. Ready? He asked. Ready, Grishka confirmed. They drove through the night, following back roads and trails that Cyrus knew from his military days. They were heading north, toward the mountains where there were small communities of outcasts and refugees who asked few questions. It would be a hard journey, dangerous and uncertain, but they were together, and that was what mattered. Days turned into weeks as they traveled, always moving, always alert for pursuit. They passed through small villages where they traded for supplies and kept their heads down. They camped in the wilderness when there were no safe places to stop. Kira adapted remarkably well, treating the whole journey as an adventure, delighted by the new sights and sounds. Finally, after a month of travel, they reached their destination. A small settlement high in the mountains, built into the side of a cliff and accessed by a narrow, winding road. It was home to miners and trappers and people who had reasons to avoid the lowlands. When Cyrus asked the village elder if there was room for a farmer and his family, the old man looked at Grishka and Kira with knowing eyes, but asked no questions. We have space, he said, but you will have to work for it. Everyone earns their keep here. We can work, Cyrus said. We are good workers. Then you are welcome. There's a cabin at the north end of the village, empty since the last tenant died. It needs repairs, but it is sound. You can have it if you want it. They took it, grateful for the chance to stop moving, to have a roof over their heads again. The cabin was small and rustic, but it was theirs. They spent weeks fixing it up, making it livable, turning it into a home. The village people were curious but respectful. They had clearly figured out that Grishka was an orc and Kira was a half-breed, but no one said anything. This was a place where people came to escape their pasts, and everyone respected that. Slowly, cautiously, Grishka began to relax. They had found a place where they could be safe, where Kira could grow up without having to hide. As the first winter in their new home approached, Grishka and Cyrus stood together on the porch of their cabin, watching Kira play in the yard with some of the other village children. It was the first time Kira had been allowed to play with other kids, and the joy on her face was radiant. We did it, Grishka said softly. We made it. We did, Cyrus agreed, wrapping his arm around her waist. It was not easy, and I'm sure there will be more challenges ahead. But we are together, and we are safe. That is all I ever wanted. I never thought I would have this, Grishka said, leaning into his warmth. A family, a home, a place where I belong. I thought I would die alone in the wilderness, cast out and forgotten. You were never meant to die alone, Cyrus said firmly. You were meant to live, to love, to raise your daughter and build a life worth living, and you have done that. You are a warrior, Grishka, but the greatest battle you ever fought was the battle to survive and protect your child. You won that battle. Grishka turned to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into that simple gesture. When they broke apart, she saw tears in his eyes that matched her own. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For taking me in when I had nowhere else to go, for loving me and Kira, for giving us a life." "Thank you for trusting me," Cyrus replied, "for letting me be part of your family, for giving my life meaning and purpose. I was just existing before you came. You made me want to live again." They stood together watching their daughter play, two people from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. The future was still uncertain, still full of challenges, but they had each other, and they had Kira, and they had this small community that had accepted them. It was not perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. And that was enough. Years passed in the mountain village. Kira grew into a strong, intelligent child who was equally comfortable speaking the Orc tongue in common, who could hunt and farm and read and write. She knew her heritage and wore it with pride, never ashamed of being different. The village children accepted her as one of their own, and she had friends and a sense of belonging that Grishka had never experienced in her clan. Cyrus expanded his farming operation, terracing the mountain slopes and growing crops adapted to the high altitude. He became known in the village as a skilled farmer and a fair man, someone people could rely on. His past as a soldier was known but not dwelled on. Here, everyone had a past they were running from. Grishka found her own place in the community. She hunted in the mountains, bringing back game that she traded for other goods. She taught some of the village women orc fighting techniques, practical skills for surviving in the harsh mountain environment. She was no longer a clan warrior, but she was still a warrior in her own right, and people respected that. On a clear autumn day, when Kira was 5 years old, Grishka stood on the cliff edge overlooking the valley below, watching the sun set over the distant lowlands. She thought about her old life, about the clan she had left behind, about the woman she used to be. That Grishka seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Cyrus approaching, Kira perched on his shoulders. They looked happy and content, her family, her heart. "We have been looking for you," Cyrus said, smiling. "Dinner's ready." "I was just thinking," Grishka said. "About what?" "About how far we have come. About how different my life is from what I thought it would be. About how grateful I am for all of it." Cyrus set Kira down, and the little girl ran to Grishka, hugging her legs. Grishka picked her up, marveling at how big she had gotten, how strong and healthy. This was her daughter, her miracle, the reason she had risked everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Cyrus asked quietly. "Leaving your clan? Giving up your old life?" "Never," Grishka said firmly. "Not for a single moment. My old life was full of violence and rigid traditions and fear. This life, with you and Kira, is full of love and hope and possibilities. I would choose this 1,000 times over." "Good," Cyrus said, pulling her and Kira into a hug, "because I am not letting you go. You are stuck with me forever." "Forever," Grishka agreed, laughing. "That sounds perfect." They walked back to the cabin together as the stars began to come out, a family united by love and choice rather than blood and tradition. It was not the life Grishka had been born into, but it was the life she had chosen, and that made all the difference. Behind them, the sun set on the lowlands, on the orc territories and human farms, on the world of conflict and prejudice they had left behind. Ahead of them, the mountain night settled in, peaceful and welcoming, a promise of safety and home. Grishka had hidden her growing belly from the clan, afraid of what they would do if they discovered her secret. Cyrus had said stay until it was safe, and she had stayed. But safety had not been about time or distance. Safety had been about finding people who loved her, about building a family that would protect each other no matter what. She was safe now. They were all safe, and that was the happiest ending she could have imagined. As they entered the cabin, warm light spilling out into the darkness, Grishka looked back one last time at the mountains that sheltered them. This was home. This was where she belonged, and she would spend the rest of her days defending this place and this family with everything she had. The door closed behind them, shutting out the cold and the darkness, and inside there was warmth and laughter and love. It was everything Grishka had never known she needed, and now that she had it, she would never let it go. Her journey had been long and difficult, full of fear and uncertainty and impossible choices, but it had led her here, to this moment, to this family, to this life worth living. And that made every hardship worthwhile. Grishka smiled as Kira climbed into her lap, chattering excitedly about her day. Cyrus sat beside them, his hand resting on Grishka's shoulder, a gesture of love and support and partnership. They were together, and they were happy, and they were safe. It was everything. It was enough. It was home.